There is something people never say out loud, because admitting it would make them sound cruel, but they feel it instantly. The moment someone starts needing them too much, something inside them shifts. Not loudly. Not consciously. Quietly. Almost like a subtle recoil. And the strange part is, it doesn't always matter how kind, how loyal, or how consistent that person is. The feeling changes anyway. As if emotional neediness itself carries a scent the mind cannot ignore. People often don't fall out of attraction. They fall out of pressure. The moment someone starts checking their phone too often, waiting a little too visibly, replying too fast, or needing reassurance just a bit too frequently, the emotional atmosphere changes. What once felt warm starts to feel tight. What once felt engaging starts to feel heavy. And what once felt natural starts to feel like obligation. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in micro-moments. A delayed reply that suddenly feels like a problem. A short message that feels colder than it actually is. A silence that gets interpreted instead of accepted. And slowly, without anyone announcing it, one person starts leaning in emotionally while the other starts stepping back without moving their feet. The terrifying part is, the person leaning in usually thinks they're doing the right thing. Being open. Being honest. Being available. But emotional availability, when it turns into emotional dependence, stops feeling like intimacy. It starts feeling like weight. And weight is something people eventually try to put down. There is a point in almost every dynamic where curiosity quietly gets replaced by awareness. You are no longer just seen, you are monitored. Your tone is tracked. Your response time is measured. Your attention becomes something someone is trying to secure instead of something that flows naturally. And that is the first silent fracture. Because attraction doesn't just live in presence. It lives in unpredictability. In space. In emotional breathing room. The moment everything becomes too accessible, too confirmable, too safe, something subtle begins to die. And nobody announces it. They just start replying differently. A little slower. A little shorter. A little less emotionally engaged. Not because they decided to lose interest, but because interest stopped feeling like discovery and started feeling like expectation. There is a dangerous illusion people fall into. They think more effort equals more value. More messages. More clarity. More reassurance. More presence. But emotional systems don't always interpret effort as value. Sometimes they interpret it as pressure. And pressure changes how someone experiences you. At first, they may respond. They may reassure. They may even comfort you. But something shifts internally when reassurance becomes routine. It stops being meaningful. It starts becoming maintenance. And once someone feels like they are maintaining your emotional state instead of experiencing you, the dynamic begins to collapse. Not loudly. Quietly. You start noticing they don't ask the same questions anymore. They don't lean into your thoughts the same way. Conversations become lighter. Functional. Predictable. The emotional depth that used to exist begins to flatten into updates. And the worst part is, you still remember how it used to feel before it changed. So you try harder. You add more energy. More warmth. More availability. But that's where the shift deepens. Because effort, when it comes from anxiety, doesn't feel attractive on the receiving end. It feels like urgency. And urgency changes the emotional interpretation of everything you say. Even affection starts to feel like pressure. There is a moment people rarely recognize while it's happening. It feels ordinary at first. A delayed reply. A missed call. A conversation that doesn't get returned with the same intensity. But internally, something deeper is being recalibrated. They are no longer afraid of losing you. And the moment that fear disappears, the emotional tension that once held everything together begins to dissolve. That is when the imbalance starts. Because now, you are not being responded to with urgency. You are being responded to with convenience. When it's easy. When it fits. When there is space. And unconsciously, the mind registers that shift instantly. People don't chase what feels guaranteed. They don't lean toward what is emotionally predictable. They don't feel pulled toward what is always available without resistance. They lean toward what feels like it might slip away. And the painful irony is, the more someone senses you trying to prevent loss, the more they emotionally distance themselves from you. Not because they are malicious, but because emotional pursuit changes the perception of value. There is a specific moment in many connections where you start to notice it clearly. You are the one initiating most conversations now. You are the one keeping things alive. You are the one filling silence that the other person is comfortable leaving empty. And strangely, they don't seem disturbed by the silence at all. That's when it hits you in a subtle way. You are no longer participating in something mutual. You are maintaining something that is slowly letting go of you. And the more you maintain it, the more one-sided it becomes. You start analyzing everything. Rereading conversations late at night. Searching for emotional shifts in old messages. Trying to find the exact moment things changed. But the truth is uncomfortable. There wasn't a single moment. There was a pattern. A gradual emotional withdrawal that didn't announce itself. It just replaced depth with distance, intensity with politeness, presence with convenience. And in that space, something else begins to form inside you. You start adapting. You stop saying certain things because they might feel like too much. You start editing your emotions before sending them. You become more careful. More measured. Less natural. Not because you changed, but because you are trying not to lose what is already slipping. That is one of the quietest forms of self-betrayal. When your emotional expression begins to revolve around keeping someone's attention instead of expressing what you actually feel. And slowly, you begin to disappear from your own behavior. The version of you that was spontaneous gets replaced by the version that is strategic. The version that waited without anxiety gets replaced by the version that checks constantly. The version that felt secure gets replaced by the version that studies tone, timing, and meaning inside silence. And the more you adjust, the more the dynamic confirms itself. Because emotional certainty removes tension. And without tension, attention starts to drift. There is a moment that feels almost humiliating when it becomes clear. They respond faster to others. They sound more engaged elsewhere. Their energy returns in spaces where you are no longer receiving it. And you are left noticing the contrast without needing anyone to explain it. That contrast does something internal. It doesn't just create jealousy. It creates emotional shrinkage. You begin to feel less significant without anyone explicitly telling you that you are less significant. You just feel it through absence of effort, absence of curiosity, absence of emotional reach. And strangely, you still stay. Because occasional warmth becomes enough to reset the discomfort. A small reply. A brief moment of attention. A short return of familiarity. And suddenly the absence feels tolerable again. That is how emotional dependency stabilizes itself. Not through constant attention, but through inconsistent reinforcement. Enough presence to keep you attached. Enough distance to keep you chasing. And the most dangerous part is, you start calling it connection. But internally, you already feel the truth. You are reacting more than you are being met. You are reaching more than you are receiving. You are trying to revive something the other person has already emotionally downgraded. And at some point, even your presence stops creating impact. You enter the space and nothing changes. You leave and nothing shifts. You speak and it lands softly instead of deeply. You try to recreate the energy that once existed naturally, but now it feels forced. Almost rehearsed. That is emotional invisibility while still being present. And it is one of the most quietly painful experiences in human connection. Because nothing officially ends. Nothing is clearly lost. But everything meaningful stops happening the same way. And you are left with the strange task of pretending you don't notice something that is already obvious in every interaction. People rarely leave suddenly. They disappear in stages. And the hardest stage is the one where they are still there, but no longer emotionally participating in the same way. And by the time you realize it fully, you are already invested in trying to bring back a version of them that only existed when you were still emotionally distant enough to be interesting. That is the hidden pattern no one wants to admit. People often stop valuing emotional access the moment it becomes guaranteed. And once that shift happens, no amount of effort can fully restore what was lost. Because it was never just about you. It was about how you made them feel when they had to reach for you. And when reaching is no longer required, something in the emotional structure collapses. Not loudly. Not visibly. Just quietly, until one day you realize you are the only one still trying to hold the shape of something that no longer holds you back. And that realization doesn't arrive like an explosion. It arrives like silence that finally becomes impossible to ignore. And that's usually where people understand it, too late to pretend they don't. If this felt uncomfortably familiar, subscribe for more psychological explorations of human behavior.